So this is our first online CAD class, so welcome. We're going to be looking at assignment 2, what's involved, and how to kind of get started on that. I have prepared 2 videos, which I think I just published to Canvas now through YouTube on assignment 2 and just analyzing a game controller. We're going to go over that now in class as well, so we can ask questions about it, but there's some parts of it that just take a little bit of time. So yeah, might as well just get into it. Let me share up my screen with you all, and it should be that one. All right, so you can all see that, I hope.
I can't see.
Angus can see it. Okay, takes a second to load maybe. It should be in the Microsoft Teams. Yeah, so anyway, first things sort of first, in assignments for task 1. For us, that's due today. So we need to be uploading that today. If you're having any issues with that, you can shoot me a message and we can talk about it. But generally, I won't really be able to provide, like, definitely no design feedback at this point or anything like that. At this point, it should purely be issues with uploading and submitting, especially because we've already had students submit at this point in the day. So it would be unfair for me to provide extra sort of design help for anyone who hasn't been able to organize that yet. Now, then we got assignment 2. So if we come down to modules and assignment 2 brief, we've got a helmet, and it's task 2 game controller and sports helmet. So essentially what we're going to be doing is going into the freeform workspace and modeling up, you guessed it, a game controller and a sports helmet. So the controller kind of builds on what we've done with the sunglasses. It's going to be heavily sculpted, and we're going to do bits of modeling as well, so bringing it back to the solid workspace, cleaning it up, adding components, that kind of thing. It's going to involve a lot of similar skills, so scaling canvases at 1:1, sculpt workspace and create, analyzing the surface, so understanding what makes a good surface and what makes it look kind of rough. This is where it can be really tricky using the sculpting tools, because it's so free, and all the freeform surfaces, it's really easy to get something that doesn't look clean and tidy and just kind of comes out as a bit of a mess. Learning about all the modified tools within the Sculpt workspace, splitting the body with a non-planar subdivided surface. That sounds complicated, it's actually very simple. Creation of a lip and groove part line, addition of gaming features, joysticks, buttons, triggers, all that. PCB integration, we're going to look at putting a PCB inside it, which is a printed circuit board, which is the green thing that controls the stuff. Inserting parts from Mastercar, so just things like screws or even clips, or maybe even the adapter for the USB side of it might be in there. And of course, we're going to output some really high quality renderings. We're going to use decals, get some awesome hero shots, and then production shots where we divide it up. And I talk about this a little bit more in the video I've uploaded to YouTube and linked to Canvas. There's some inspiration Scott's provided, but you should all go out, find things you like, and sketch. So something like this that's quite complex, like a game controller, you can't just make it from nothing. You should really be sketching ideas and how to work with them. So even though I probably won't be working from a proper sketch this week, I might actually go off and sketch something up of my own and go through that in the other videos I'll be providing as well. Here we have Scott's, and as you can see, it's got, you know, the buttons in it. The surface is broken up. It's a bit hard to see on the screen because he's made it all black, but it's all broken up. The surface transitions are pretty smooth. There's a top and a bottom, you know, and we'll look at some of that stuff as well later. Part 2 is a sports helmet. So again, building on a lot of the similar skills, a bit more in the modeling workspace as well. Some of the cool things of this is we're going to be making a web strap. So like, how do we make things look natural? I really like the addition of like a glass lens or a little visor, something, you know, just to add a bit of depth to our renderings, but there's heaps of things we can apply here. You know, just the way these surfaces sweep and join together is going to make some really sleek renderings. But yeah, dynamic features, air vents, sun visors, like overlays, all that kind of thing. So it's, you know, a lot of helmets have the same overall form, but how you break up, modify, and adjust these surfaces to look really wacky and interesting really changes the characteristics of them. So everyone should have quite a unique looking helmet. This isn't, you know, the kind of thing where we want you to play it safe. It should be really interesting and eye-catching. Like you can see, these two are almost the same in form, but it's the details, the thickness of the strap, the extra cushioning here, the color even, you know, this bright pink one looks a lot more friendly. This one looks real rugged and sporty. And here we've got one Scott's modeled up, which is pretty awesome actually. And this uses texture a lot. So even just that kind of, expanded foam on the inside looks really impressive. The use of decals, it can be really hard to get the patterning to work on Fusion Online or whatever this plugin is. So don't worry about the weird dots not patterning out properly. We'll be able to get that to go really smooth. Again, bringing in logos that we've done as decals or going to the point of embossing them. And, you know, the strap on this looks quite natural. You know, he's gone and put the little strap hanging down on the end. It's got the gravity going, all these kind of things. Yeah, so that's pretty much the assignment. We've got till, what have we got to? We've got till week 9 to do it. There's a lot of work there. However, we're all great at CAD. We should be able to do this. Any general questions about that in terms of that as an assignment?
Yeah, so we basically just design our own, so it's not copying like the glasses. We just design concept and then modeling it up.
Absolutely. So yeah, we're looking to other things for inspiration, and then we're designing our own. So it doesn't have to be, you know, a groundbreaking design when we're talking about the controller. Obviously, they're all kind of conventional in the layout and that, because the further you stray from the layout of a conventional control, the harder it's going to be to model it up using the same skill set. But yeah, absolutely don't just go, and I'm not a fan of anyone just trying to model up a 360 or a PS4 controller or something like that. You can model up a controller for the PlayStation, use the same type of buttons, but make it your own, make it interesting. And same with the helmet. Go unique and do it yourself.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that? How long should each task take? Well, the way we're going to be doing it I mean, you can kind of assume if it's week 4 now and it's due in week 9, it should take half the time of that to do each one. But the way we're going to work on it, instead of just modeling up the game controller first and then doing the helmet, because that will generally, Dustin said that's generally led to people spending a lot of time getting the controller perfect and then kind of rushing the helmet to try and get that through. What we're going to do is model them up at the same time. So 1 week we'll focus on the game controller, the other week we might focus on the helmet, because a lot of the skills are transferable, and you'll probably find that something you learn in the game controller is applicable to making something look really good on the helmet, or makes it a lot easier to develop that. Because everything's done in stages, right? We want to get the rough shape of both of them first. Then we want to move on to adding details and refining it. Then we want to do both of them rendering at the same time. So yeah, it doesn't really matter how long each of them takes. Obviously, a bunch of hours. You could rush it and smash it out and get a credit, or you could spend a lot of time actually going at it smart, step by step, doing iterations, starting again once you get to a certain point and you think, you know what, maybe I'm not happy with this. Don't just spend forever trying to tweak the exact same one if it's not going anywhere. Really plan it out with sketching as well. Obviously, you can just do base elements because we do want to explore the freeform stuff a lot. But yeah, a couple hours a week on each should get you there quite comfortably. Any other questions? All right, so we might as well just move on because everyone's super happy with that and it's going to be awesome. One thing we can do to get started is look at game controllers and look at how they're designed. So what we could do, we could go to Google and just go game controller design. But that just gives us kind of more of that stuff that Scott was showing off with his Pinterest board. It's pretty obvious that just about everything has 4 buttons on the right, a directional pad on the left, and 2 joysticks, some buttons like a start and options button in the middle. So even if you're not into gaming, that's gross. If you're not into gaming, it's easy enough to pick up what we should be going for here. If you are into gaming, you can actually look at adding some of the advanced features, like the Xbox Pro controller has the extra buttons on the back now and all these kinds of things. So if you want to design a controller specifically for playing COD or something for racing games, you might develop it with extra distance travel in the triggers, all that kind of stuff. However, that's one place to start. Let's see this one. This one looks special. Yeah, that's special. So one of the places we're actually going to start is by going to modules and coming down to game controller files. So what this is, don't worry about that, it doesn't matter. What this is an upload of the Steam controller, which is this controller that's on screen now, and it's the CAD files for it. So it's a open source sort of thing. People are meant to be able to manufacture parts of them for their own. There's a thorough tutorial I've put on Canvas for downloading and installing this, but basically what happens is you download this, you extract it. Let's see if I can do that. I'll have to change how I'm sharing my screen. So let me just pause that for a second and share my screen too. So what happens is you'll download this file, you extract it, you get all these weird G files. I don't know what G stands for. It doesn't matter. And there's some reference images. These are of a different controller. Doesn't matter. All we have to do with that is come across and pretty much drag this into Fusion. We go upload, drag and drop all select files, sort by type because we only want the G file, so make sure you don't get the XML. You drag and drop there. It asks for a top level assembly file. And the one we actually want to select is called Steam Controller Workshop 3. What this means is like that just kind of controls where the location of all the parts are based off. So you really do need to select this file. It's 5 kilobytes. It's called that. And again, you can just follow along and pause the tutorial. What you do is hit upload. It'll take a while to upload all of these parts to Fusion because it's cloud-based. And then once that's done, you can open it up and it gives you something that looks similar to this. I've just thrown a green texture on it and flipped the surface normals around because they come in a little weird. That's in that tutorial, but it's not very important right now. And here we can actually start to get a really good look at how these controllers work. So some of the details on the back are really cool. We can, be inspired by how this embeds. I think the more important parts of this is looking at how it splits up into parts, because obviously we don't want to draw a big blob, and that's kind of what happens with a lot of these. We end up just going all blobby and it looks like a mess, which obviously we don't want. We want it to look crisp and sharp and amazing. So we can isolate the case and bumpers and hide some of the components. So like right here, the bumpers are one piece that flexes attached to the back. That's kind of interesting. There is a second back onto that. But here we have a top and a bottom. So if we go to, case and bumpers. All right, so is there isolate? All right, excellent. So here we can see the top of it, right? We're not going to go into the extremes of all this ribbing support and this kind of stuff, which is provide structural integrity, clip together. It would be cool if we could have some of these elements, but in terms of will it actually structurally hold together in someone's hand after playing for 500 hours? That's not really an accessible part of the project. It's interesting, it's cool, but not something we're going to be looking at. Although it does help add realism for our renders. So we want to have it kind of to some level when we can. And then putting the bottom on, we can see how those things fit together. Posts line up, screws go through them, that kind of thing happens. So it would be interesting to see some of this, but again, not crucial. Having screws in it is kind of important, and we do want to show that, but to what extent is up to you. Again, if you want to do it really basic and get a credit, you can do just basic screws into solid plastic. If you want to sort of excel and really improve your skills, you'll look at doing proper counting syncing that leads to a tighter thing so the thread can actually bite in. And like I said, coming back to the brief, talking about splitting a surface with a what was the wording on that? It was a non-planar something. Splitting a body with a non-planar subdivided surface. So what that pretty much means is, from this side, it looks like it's split with a single line. at an angle, but then we go from the front, we can see that it goes down, it comes up, and it's kind of like this type of 3D split. So obviously we can't do that with a 2D sketch, and we're going to have to use an advanced surface to split that part up. And there's a couple of ways to kind of go about that, but there's one quite simple, easy way that we're going to look at. I'll show you that in a minute. Other things with this is just that analysis of the surface. So going into inspect, curvature analysis, that kind of stuff. I've already got some used up here. Like, okay, I've got a section analysis, so we can cut through and have a look at material thicknesses. I think this one's a bit thick. It's like 2.5 mil or something like that in some areas. We're going to aim for about 1.8 on our thickness. But that doesn't really matter at the moment. So I'll show you just like what I'm talking about with, we can go curvature maps, select the top. That's going to take a second. Sometimes it freaks out. Fusion does this a lot, so just kind of ignore it and go with it. There we go. Okay, so what Fusion's done is calculated where the really curvy areas of the surface are and all that kind of stuff. I find that Gaussian or Gaussian doesn't really show us what we want. I think we're after principal maximum. So this shows us a bit clearer what we're looking for. You can turn on high quality and it just smooths it out a bit more. Again, takes another second as it does. So you might be able to find files of other game controllers online. I know it's kind of like a common project for students or CAD modelers to model up a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox controller. So if you can find a really accurate one, you can absolutely download that as well, put that into Fusion, and then analyze the surface too. I'm just going to apply this to the bottom one now. There you go. So we can see some things here. What's really sort of interesting and of use, so the lighter areas are where there's less curvature, the darker areas are where there's more curvature, and we can adjust it a bit to set some thresholds. Doesn't really matter. It's just about giving us an idea. And you can see the way it's split up. It kind of goes on the sides, area where there's less curvature. It doesn't really work for the very back, but the surface gets quite flat along here. And the front is generally just split in the middle because it's a tighter area. You need a bit of surface area on both sides. But this is how most controllers will go. And another thing that's very important when it comes to splitting is looking at how these surfaces meet up. So this is what's called draft or draft angle. And what we need to know is when you've got something that goes into an injection mold, it needs to be able to go in and out of a mold, right? So let me just hide that and that. If this goes into a mold and seals up and gets injected with plastic, it can't have any areas where, let's say, it molds over the piece of metal. So if this, instead of coming out at this draft, came out like that and then went up, once this little section here is sealed over a bit of metal, it's going to be incredibly hard or impossible to get it out of a mold. So that's why we use things called draft angles. It's very common in product engineering. You hear everyone talk about it all the time because it might even be their favorite thing. But one way to kind of just get around that is where these parts meet up. Fusion's freezing up. Of course it is. Where these parts meet up, there we go. We want to make sure they don't come over this sort of horizon line or vertical normal line here. We want to make sure everything comes to a point, splits at that point, and then moves back away. Does everyone kind of understand that? Some comments in the chat or... Yep. Okay, it seems that everyone knows exactly, which is awesome. Perfect. So that's good. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. Again, I talked about that very briefly in the other video. Yeah, so we want to split it up in good, interesting ways. Have a look, you should go in and have a real in-depth look at all the other parts. So let's just go back to activating the main component. Some sort of battery holder thing. I don't know. That part doesn't matter. The bottom door, if it's going to open up and take batteries. The molding on this is quite almost excessive. Like, it probably wouldn't be the best controller in my opinion. So think about what might be really comfortable and what would be interesting to texture up. Have a look at the buttons, how they're made up. I'll go over that. Things like this little switch, this has a lot of detailed fillets. We might not go to that level on something so insignificant. And then the modeling of the PCB, really basic in this because obviously someone else would manufacture the PCB, but we can look at that too. But for the actual controller side of things, it's very good to have a look at this. So follow along with that tutorial that I put on Canvas and open it up, have a good look, take some notes, do some sketches, and come up with something. Yeah, any questions about that sort of thing in general? Okay, so that's good. Everyone's comfortable with that. I'm happy with that. So what we want to do then is to go on and actually start modeling something up. So yeah, here's one I was playing with earlier. And I'm going to go through how I did this very basically, and I'll provide another video that you can go over in your own time as well, just because I can put a little bit more practice into those in terms of making absolutely sure I cover every element. But much like the last one, this starts with a canvas, which is, if we have a look, it's just the sort of generic image that's provided with this. Doesn't matter about that. But from here, we've got a front view and a side view. So you should be modeling up front, side, back view if you want, like quick sketches. And from there, I'm just going to blitz through this roughly, and then we'll go through actually making one. It's about creating a shape that, I'm not modeling this exact one. I'm kind of going off and doing my own thing. So you can use things as inspiration. If you like doing a PlayStation controller, you want it roughly the same size. So you go through, get some shapes in. What's important is how these contour lines work. Otherwise, it does look blobby. Like right now, this does look quite blobby, as we say, as a form. Adding in some detail, like if you've got the little thing that holds the thumbsticks, mirroring them across, combining them to the surface, filleting them. Then what's important is running a shell So if we have a look, it's actually, shelling it to the right thickness. I go with 1.8 or 1.7, something like that. And it's important to do that after the main body's been sort of assembled. So you can always go back and disable the shell and remodify it later. But it's about ensuring it has a consistent thickness across the whole way. Then we actually start to get into this whole non-planar surface thing, which involves making a surface that is not planar. So just as a very quick description, planar means flat, like a plane, as in SolidWorks plane, not aeroplane. And non-planar means anything that isn't that. It could be squiggly, curvy, or anything like that. And we use that to split it up. So like we saw with the steam controller, it had an angle on the side, but then when you come and look at it on the front, it comes up, splits the body up higher, comes back down, follows it around, and then at the back it's up here. So non-planar surfaces are easy enough to put together, but you want them to be quite simple. We do that in freeform, and that'll be easy enough. Then I actually went through, and because what we're going to do is use this to split the surface up, I went through and did it in quite a complex way, which I'm not going to show you today. That'll be for like a tutorial for next week or even the week after. But it was about giving it this kind of lip so that the two pieces can snap together really well. And if we have a look with a section analysis, you can see, there we go, that it's even got tolerances in there. The quality is, there it is, the quality is good at the moment. So we've got this nice clean part between them. Maybe it'd be good with even a little bit of a fillet there to help it just mesh together smoothly. But that's pretty much, why is that not working? That's pretty much like how we're going to go. We want to do a lip and groove. You can have it like this. You can have one where it's got just like a tongue in the middle of it, but generally this is fine for injection molding. It can be really tricky to try and get these parts consistent. But you can have a tiny bit of overmolding on those bits just because it starts to get quite thin and flexible. So it can usually be removed from a mold without any problems. All right, so I think if there's not any sort of major questions right now, what I'll do is just go about roughly modeling up something like this and how I would do it. Does that sound agreeable? If anyone's got any questions. All right, no questions. No problem. Easy enough. We all know what we're doing. So what I'm going to do is just make a new design, and we want to work from a canvas. So you've sketched up something. It's amazing and awesome. You're going to insert it. Just go from your computer, find wherever your files are at, and just put it on top plane. And just go okay. Oh. Sometimes you got to rotate it. And then we want to, like we did last time, calibrate. Now I measured up the other controller, and roughly from here to here was like 120 mil. You'll see why in the video. It just comes up with randomly that measurement. But if you've got a real controller, measure that up. If you're basing it off something you saw online, see what specs they have on it and just kind of go with that. Then we want to put in our second one. So again, browse from the computer, sketch side view. It could be a front view or a back view or whatever as well. And from here, we just kind of scale it up roughly to get it kind of in the right shape. Obviously, that's too big, but something like that where they kind of overlap from the side view. That's absolutely fine for now, and pretty much all we need. But yeah, practice sketching, scan it in, or redo it in Illustrator so you've got sharp lines you can work with. So you can, work with something really well. The sharp lines on this make it a lot easier to see and follow along when you're doing freeforming. If it's like a really rough sketch, it might not be super awesome. So, create form. This is where we move into the sculpting workplace, so it changes to all these tools. There is heaps and heaps and heaps of ways we could go about modeling this, right? We could create a plane that comes out from here and edit the form, drag things to kind of look right from there. Oops. Drag it to look right, bring it up, and then hold in Alt, bring surfaces down, bring it around, all this kind of stuff. We could do that. And then we could bring it close and merge it like that, or we could even go and use the bridge tool, which just pretty much makes a loft. We could do something like that, right? The problem is sometimes you get an uneven amount of faces across the sides, and we really want to try and keep it even, especially for, like, I'll say the start, but I also mean our first one. So, we encourage redoing these if you get stuck, or if you've done it to a certain point and think, I've got a better idea. We really encourage you to try this more than once. So your second time's always going to be faster at modeling up than your first one. So one really good way Dustin goes about it, I think he's figured it out at this point, is to use a cylinder. So the good thing about a cylinder is, and it can be very rough. The thing about the cylinder is it evenly spaces out all these points. So we already know it's going to be a very controllable surface, because if these points were close together, they'd be sharper, but right now it's very uniform, and that'll work out really well for us. We want to start out as simple as possible. So just a straight cylinder with that many surfaces that way and divided up by 8 that way works really well. And we're just going to go okay for now. And I'm going to model up 1/2 at a time because we're going to mirror it in a minute. What we want to do from there is modify it. So edit the form. We can grab the top, pull it down. We've got this thing here which flattens. So what that does is flattens or extends how these surfaces work. And if we look at them in the box mode, we can see it just drags that completely flat or stretches it out. So that can be really useful. I do recommend using the box mode a bunch because it's very helpful for getting it right. Because obviously when it blends together everything in this, you might not know if, it looks like that's there, but it's really there and it's trying to calculate it based on here. So you might think I need to pull this out more to get closer, but really it can be more of a matter of bringing this one up more. So using the box mode helps a lot to actually understand what the computer's trying to do. And from there, we just want to go do the same sort of thing with the bottom, flatten it out to whatever in the middle. Something like that's fine. Check it. All right, so we're starting to get that sort of round shape that looks like it could be the middle of a controller. Looks a bit thick, but it doesn't matter. I'm just going to open up this and put it on the other screen in case you have any questions. You can ask them now. as I kind of go about some of this. And what we want to do is, much like the glasses, we can start pulling this surface out and across. So we want to edit the form. If you click and hold in Shift, you can select the surfaces, or if you double click, it's going to select this loop, which obviously goes all the way around and works pretty well in most cases if you can keep the surface in control. So what we want to do is try to follow around here, and you'll see why when we try and cap it. So we hold in Alt, we drag it out, we rotate it a bit, and right now what we can do, we can position it, we can scale it, but this is where we start to get into some of the options of the coordinate space. So if I rotate this, we see that down still stretches it along the whichever axis that is, the Y and the X, and moving it down moves it that way. What we can do is change some of these up. So if we go to the selection space, what it does is it finds the average of these selections. So when we extend it, it actually pushes it in that direction. If we go down, it slides it down in that way. If we go to the side, it pulls it out in that way. So that's really useful when you're doing something like this, so you can really control it quite well. So I'll do something like that, hold in Alt, drag it out again, rotate it some more, pull it in, and I'm going to do that a couple more times, trying to get it, you want to get that near perpendicular, so we're going to really start to pull it across as we go down in a minute. So we'll do it even a bit more. And yeah, something like that. We come down, we rotate, we compress it, adjust it. And so we can see it's starting to follow that form pretty well. It'll need some modifying, but it's working out at the moment. And then down one more time, because we want it to get quite flat. Because capping it can be quite a problem. Well, not so much a problem, it can be a complicated procedure. So if we have a look at that, we have this, and we could modify it to start bringing it down as well. So if we go, we can double click here to select a ring. If we double click here, it selects the whole thing. If we select here and hold in Shift, then double click, it pulls it around. There's a bunch of little quirky sort of controls in that. I think it's just a matter of practice for you to get used to it. But we can do something like bring that right down there. But then we want to almost even it all out. Bring that up a bit. Grab this one, bring it down a bit. And it's about getting a consistent form, right? So that's why I go back to the box mode a bunch. Because if you can get it something that looks like it gradually changes from one sort of group of edges to the other, you'll find that the transition ends up being really smooth. So something like that starting to look quite smooth. Now, we've got a couple options when it comes to capping the end of this. You might first want to just look through the tools and go, you see one that's got fill hole. And, obviously there's a hole on the end of it. So we double click this to select the hole. And what it does, it joins that surface across to there, that one across there, and that one across there. And it turns into this little stub thing, which then is quite difficult to modify. So if we select it and try and pull it out more, it kind of works. It looks all right. But then it gets harder to control some of these elements as well. Our general preferred method of doing something like this, because we want to make sure we've got everything matched up. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sides, because we made that cylinder with 8 sides. So what we can actually do is create what's called a quad ball. And you'll see what it is in a sec. So we just click. The default size is fine for that. Span faces 2, and what it does is, using squares, it makes up a sphere. So if we select that and go to box mode with Alt 1, we can see it's made up of a bunch of squares and it creates a sphere when it's rounded. The other option of that obviously is just a sphere, but they're created differently. If you have a look at this, it all comes to one point at the end, and that never really renders out or works perfectly as a form. So this is one of the real differences between these sort of free-form T-spline bodies and conventional CAD modeling. So what we can do here is grab this and orientate it where we want it. And we're going to use this as our end cap. So we can put it there, somewhere there. Position it, squish it a bit. So we've got it roughly, like, you know, very roughly where we kind of want it. We can come in and hide the first body. What we're going to do is delete all these faces, and that's going to open up our what is it? Our quad ball. So then we can join our quad ball to our main form. As you see, they're not too far off. There's a few ways we could do this. We could go modify. Sorry, we can go modify and what's it called? Weld vertices, which means it's going to go through and join one set of vertices to the other, like that. And we can go through and do that. You know, and it'll start to, whatever it does, even out. Or what we can just do is go merge edge, which is a much easier way to do it. We double click this to select the loop. We select where it's going to group to, and we do that. We go OK, and it just does it. It merges all these ones to that one, depending on which one you select first. And right away now we've got this, which is sealed up really nicely in 4. That still gives us heaps of control over the surface, as opposed to the one that bridged weirdly across. And yeah. So from there, we've got it sealed up. And what we want to do is now add some symmetry. We go to mirror duplicate because we want to duplicate it off to the side and merge it up. So we need to have our origin showed, select our body, mirror plane, select the right plane. So that's probably not as visible. Select the right plane. We don't need to show this at the moment. And we just want to have this option turned on, which is weld. So what that means is going to join it together. And now we have something that looks like a game controller. If we hit finish form, it then converts it into surfaces, and we can see it's all nice and smooth as one surface. So that's how you get a real basic form. A much more complicated controller might have sort of different ways of going about it. You know, you might go with the plane method and build up each face at a time, then join them together. If it's got really sharp edges, I suggest using the crease function, like we looked at with the sunglasses. So we can crease specific edges, like across the top. It can get kind of weird trying to blend in crease surfaces to non-crease surfaces. But you can go in and fillet it later, and you can really control how that transitions. So we can make it really tight, like the top of an Xbox controller like that or something. So I don't recommend trying to do fillets in... I never recommend trying to do fillets that are controllable in freeform. It's always generally better to go about creasing the surfaces first and then blending them in, just because, yeah, you get that level of control. You get the nice flat surface across here. When you do try and control it, it starts to get really messy because what you have to do, I'll just show you, let's edit that and apply it down here as well. And we'll just make it a chord length. No, it doesn't like that. Curvature, make it a bit smaller. There you go. Okay, so that's really cool. That's nice and sharp. You know, nice sharp contour on the back. If we were to try and do this in here, one way we can do it is get rid of these creases, is by adding more lines. So if we go double click this, it selects that whole loop all the way around there. And we can insert an edge, or we can do something like a bevel, which inserts a line on each side of it. Again, you should play around with these tools. So we can make that really nice and tight. And it looks quite good, all right? And the problem with that is, like, if we have a look at our box mode, now we've got two lines that are very close here. So if we want to edit the form from this point on, we have to modify the faces as one, because if we try and pull just one edge, then it's going to make that fillet a lot wider and blur in. So, you know, I prefer, and I think for you all, it should be really important to keep it under control. Because that way, you know, it just gets out of hand when you try and blend and like make this super smooth and look really nice. Like you do it to there, you do it there. Now, you know, it looks good. It all blends up well. Apart from this starts to get weird, and you want to edit how the handles look, but you got to pick a bunch of things, and when you move it, it affects how that blends together. So how do you turn the box mode on and off? There's two ways to do that. There is display mode up here. So you select the body and change the settings through there. This one's all right, where it shows both at once. Or you could use the Alt key on your keyboard. I don't know what the Mac version is, and press Alt 1, Alt 2, and Alt 3, and that goes through the alternate modes. So yeah, you can do that. Moving on, so our other game controller had, no worries, our other game controller had like these sections in which we could put a joystick in. So what we can do with that, if we want to add a shape to it, we could do it in freeform, or we could do it in solid modeling. Might as well stick with the freeform at this point. We can create a form, make it a quad ball if you want, doesn't really matter. This is if you want, obviously, a ball shape to be connected to it. And we can edit it. Oops. Bit smaller. Just go about positioning it. Should be really easy to position this if you've got a pre-existing sketch that you should all be working from. We can even go in and crease some edges along the top. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. You can get wacky with it. When we go finish form, we can see it's there. Maybe we just want to go back in, edit it, and rotate it a bit more so it's facing forwards. Okay, so we've got something like that. That's perfect and amazing. We'll just round off that edge slightly. Yeah, somewhere there. Well, actually, no. Let's go 2. All right, so that's nice and crisp. So we've got that. Easy enough to duplicate it to the other side, unless you're doing an Xbox thing where it's off all in wacky little areas. Select your object, mirror. Okay, so right now we've got 2 objects or 3 objects and a controller. We need to merge them all together. Like we did with the sunglasses, we want to combine the surface or combine the solids, but in this case, we want to just join them. So what this is going to do, is join the solid areas of this to the solid areas of this, and it's going to look excellent, and merge them together. So if we go for a section analysis, we can just pick the right plane. We see it's solid, and then it continues to be solid all the way through. That's exactly what we want. We can go through and add a fillet in here. Something just to smooth it out. And so now it looks like it's a part of the surface. And then we have to go in and shell it out. So we select the shell feature. And what we want to do, we can select faces or body. We can either click here, or if you want to be super safe, you can just select there to make sure it selects the whole body. Inside thickness, I'm just going to punch in about 1.8. That might take a second to calculate. It didn't like that, probably because I've made these fillets so tight. So if I just cancel that and go back, we can do these fillets later. Sometimes it's picky, sometimes it's not. You'll just have to see how it all goes, especially with shelling things out. It doesn't really like fillets that much. Shell, let's try again, 1.8. Yep, and it's not giving us any errors, so we can just hit OK. And it's done something. I don't know what that is. Let's just roll that forward. I'm not quite sure at all what that is. Let's make sure we're selecting the body. Okay, so Fusion's being a bit magical at the moment, as it does. Let's try not 10, 1.6. Let's try 0.8 that way and 0.8 the other way. And maybe it doesn't like the fact that these quad balls crease, because I wasn't having this problem when I was doing it with cylinders. Okay, it really doesn't like that quad ball, so let's just go back and uncrease that. Okay, and of course it works perfectly now, because why not? So if we go section analysis, there, it's all hollowed out. We can see that our quad walls are hollow as well. And that all works really well. So we can go through and add in these fillets now or whenever, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, just know if there's problems with the shelling, most likely it's to do with a fillet or a weird edge or something like that. It's not really a big deal. Yeah, so in terms of modeling up a base form, I think that's pretty good of a place to start. Obviously, there's heaps more that we could be going on with, but I think for now, that should really work for all of you guys to get started on and see how you go. Obviously, your surface should be more complex than this. It should have more sections to look more detailed. It should suit a sketch you've done or something like that. But yeah, how does everyone feel about trying to do that? So, you know, download the Steep controller, look at getting that done, or having a look at that, finding something online that you might import into Fusion, have a good look around it. Oh, actually, you know what? Sorry, I forgot to go over splitting it. Silly me. So, splitting it. Very simple. So simple, I forgot it. So, what we want to do is create a plane in Sculpt. And it doesn't matter. I always use a rectangle from the center just because that way we can ensure symmetry. We make it bigger than our piece, and what we want to do is drag this slider that way and that way to just kind of divide it up a bit to ensure we've got a good amount of control over our surface. We can turn on Symmetry Mirror, and sometimes it might be length, sometimes it might be width, depending on how it is. Just make sure you've got a line going down the middle. Hit OK, and what we want to do is adjust this surface so everything intersects where we want it to. So if we want it on the right, you know, we generally want it to go down the side of it quite nicely. So we can kind of grab every second surface and modify it that way. Something like that. I know this still looks quite flat at the moment, but we can see that the front up here needs to come up. It would be nicer to see a little more contrast on that, but we can always check by going finish form, seeing where it intersects. We go in, we might want to pull this down because where it's intersecting down here, we want it a little lower. So something like that. Across the front, we might want it a bit lower down. And again, just keep checking, see how it looks. That might be all right there. The back's pretty good, but maybe I actually want it to look a little more interesting. So we can edit the form here. Pull that up higher. Maybe we'll pull this one lower. Doesn't really matter for now. Yeah, so now we've got more of an interesting sweep going across the surfaces, and you know what, I'm just going to pull this corner down as well because that's annoying me. Something like that. Like that. All right, so we've got something that's relatively in the middle of most of it, some flourishes here and there. As we can see, this is a non-planar surface, and then it becomes really easy. We go split body, body to split, splitting tools. You don't need to extend it because we made sure it goes well over the body, and just go OK. And we hide our surface, and now we've got this part line that's going through it, and we can see that it's quite cleanly split. So this is the level of splitting we're doing at the moment. We're not going to be looking at doing the whole lip and groove thing yet. It's a bit more advanced for the time being. But then we can even do things like come in and add a very slight fillet here, like you might find on a controller. So even if it's like maybe like 0.2. So something very small like that. Like we were talking about with the sunglasses, that makes a huge difference when it comes down to things like rendering. So we want to consider all of our little part lines and things like that. When we turn on in-game as render, yeah, we can see that shadow coming through. And again, because we kept this surface so simple with minimal bodies, we can see that our reflections and everything are really smooth and awesome. So it's really good to kind of go back and forth, even through rendering, to make sure everything looks really good, because we want these to look crisp and sleek and make amazing renders. So going up to render, seeing how it looks, will give you a really good idea of how it renders. So that's part of it as well. If it looks too blobby like this does over here, you go back and edit it and pull some weight out of it by adjusting those arms in or flattening them out or whatever it might be. Okay, so with that explained, does anyone have any questions on just getting started on this assignment? Yeah, if you get to this point by next week, continue on. I'm going to be putting up further on parts before next class. And I think what we're going to aim for is pretty much next week in class should be building up stuff, as in like adding things on, getting the lip and groove right, but you should be further than this in terms of your surface and modeling. And you should come to class with questions for help and all that kind of thing. So in class next week, I'll be able to provide a bit of assistance with that, as opposed to just showing purely how I go about doing stuff.